It was just mind-blowing. The customer sat there, this is the best thing he's ever heard in his life. The retail business is called the Listening Room. We've got a branch in Durban, so we've got Durban and Cape Town, and then we do have a dealer or two in Johannesburg, and those are the three main centres that we operate from. I started the business in 2005 out of frustration in the audio business in South Africa, which wasn't truly representative of what I thought audio lovers wanted. So the start was from passion, totally from passion. Rodney then came in about 2 or 3 years later, and we grew, and he took the business from what was a niche, the more sort of uncommon brands, and then he started to introduce into more well-known brands, and we managed to get these as we grew and became more known in the industry.
I've had the Cape Town store now for just over 10 years, and our business is growing slowly, which we're very happy about.
Definitely.
Yes, it was. Yeah,
definitely. I grew up a little bit older than Rodney.
Yeah.
I grew up in an era where there were very few very good brands, and then all of a sudden a lot of brands exploded into the world, and they were what I considered just imitations of what was great. So I wanted to stay with the brands that had a heritage and a history,
the essence of it,
and encapsulated the music that I thought we were looking for. One of the brands Rodney didn't mention was Van der Steen, and that is a premier brand that is probably very underrated because Richard Van der Steen has his own way of doing things, and I think it's a very good business model for audio, not necessarily for business, but for audio I think it is, and that was our trajectory.
We didn't sort out the highest price product
Or the highest selling.
Or the highest selling. It was what we felt was important to us in terms of its sonic capabilities and its place in the market, and our market specifically. Yeah.
My passion for music came from our school days when we used to go to clubs and dance and do all of those things, but the music that was produced was, for me, not listenable. So I bought a record secondhand at school on our advertising board, which just transformed my life completely into a music lover. It was a record called Grave New Worlds by a group called Straubs. David Cousins is the lead singer in it. And when I heard that record, it set me onto a path of progressive rock and jazz and a little bit of classical music, but I just became enthralled with the world of music.
Mine also started at a very young age, obviously junior school, high school, listening to local bands, local music, and I mean that obviously progressed throughout life. I then met Mark 20 years ago, and then understanding how much better music can be, so you start reliving the music that you did in your childhood and then start exploring even more, and that's how I got into it.
For me it was the Nagra classic preamp and 2 classic amps, power amps that were configured into mono configuration, and when we set that system up for a customer that was looking for Nagra, I think Rodney, you were there with us, and it absolutely blew us away. It was just mind-blowing. It was a game-changing opportunity, and we all sat there, the customer sat there absolutely mortified. He was like, this is the best thing he's ever heard in his life. And the sale happened immediately. There was no debate. That happened immediately.
For me, it was always an aspirational product. I knew the history, I knew the understanding, I knew the engineering behind it. And it's very difficult when it's not in your continent to see, hear, feel. So I made my journey to Munich, the mecca of audio, once a year, and I met Nagra, and I managed to listen to the classic series then, and you had just unveiled the prototype of the HD amplifiers. That sat with me for years and years and years, and I pushed our company to be a partner of Nagra for
2-3 years.
Rodney, 2-3 years pushed.
And I want to do good Nagra justice. And when I felt we could do them justice was when we considered it.
When we sent the email.
Yeah.
It's difficult for me to remember my cassettes. I mean, I was young enough to have cassettes, but my first, let's call it, proper vinyl was Dire Straits.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can remember the first record I bought clearly, and it was what prompted me on the road of not buying music after that for a while. It was the Three Dog Night, and it was an album called Naturally. And on that record was Jeremiah Was a Bullfrog.
Flop.
One of the top hits, and it just didn't do it for me until I found Straubs as a used record in my school days. But that was my first record, Three Dog Night, Straubs. Three Dog Night, Naturally.
Yes, it was a local artist that is now, he's since passed away, an international artist, and that was Johnny Clegg in Savuka. And I watched it at the beachfront in Durban at what was then called the Green Market Square. And I was a young boy, I wasn't even in my teens, and I remember some stranger picking me up and putting me on his shoulders, and I was just, I mean, I'm even getting goosebumps now. And it's just the feeling that pushed over you, that rolled over you, it stayed with me forever. Yeah.
For me, I think maybe around the first, and I can't remember the first, but one of the first was Paul Simon playing in a rugby stadium, which is, I think it's quite a well-known sport internationally. The sound quality was just superb. Paul Simon was absolutely outstanding, and he had to support artists. Steve Gadd was on drums. I think Malcolm Brecker was on saxophone, but it was just so good, and I lived such an experience, and it left such a memory with me. But it was that, and then Foreplay was another group that they worried about the acoustics, and when they played in the theatre that we listened to, or I listened to them, it was such good quality that you knew the musicians had set this up properly, that the engineers had done their work, and it sounded absolutely outstanding. Go for it.
Yeah. I think this may ruin our business. Obviously, Johnny Clegg is my guilty pleasure, but every so often a Taylor Swift song comes onto the system.
I just lost respect for you. My guilty pleasure, probably the Bee Gees. I'm not allowed to like them because my wife...
Me neither. Taylor Swift's not allowed.
It's not. But the Bee Gees, for me, before they started with their Saturday Night Fever and Barry Gibb developed a staccato voice, maybe that after that was not so good. But Massachusetts, I started to cry and started to laugh, and I started to joke. Sorry, my memory is getting a bit old. But yeah, there were a few Bee Gees numbers that really guilty pleasure. And I think he released an album called Guilty with Barbara Streisand. So yeah, maybe that's top of my hit of guilty pleasures.
Well,
I thank you, and I am honored to be here, and it's been an experience of a lifetime to have been here for this day, and it'll go down in my memory as one of the highlights. Thank you, and thank you very much.
It really is. It's, for me, as I said, Nagra's been an aspirational product that I saw in magazines, and as I said, I knew everything about them. And to be representing them now in our country, for me, is one of the greatest pleasures in life.
Thank you both.
Thank you.